When I was 21, I transferred to a college in San Francisco. I checked out a room that was listed for rent on Craigslist. It was a really nice 2-bedroom apartment that was cheap and close to campus, so it was the ideal spot. The girl who lived there was 29 years old. Beth was tall and wide and had jet black hair and wore pale makeup. Although a little quiet, she came across nice and seemed to like me. Plus, she had agreed to let me move in, so things were looking good for now. My first night there, we went out for pizza, and that's when I could tell something was a little off with her. Throughout dinner, she kept telling me how much I looked like Shia LaBeouf. I didn't know what to say, so I shrugged it off with a, "Thanks?" I mean, I looked nothing like Shia LaBeouf, so it just didn't make any sense to me. When we got back home, she asked me if I had seen her room yet. I said no, and she took me to go see it. Her walls were covered in posters of Shia LaBeouf. She even had printed out photos of him all over her mirror. She owned all his movies. I didn't know what to make of it. It was creepy. The whole night she had been saying I looked like him, and now it's obvious to me that she's obsessed with the guy. A few weeks passed, and I never really saw her that much. We didn't spend any time together. She would come home from work and practically run to her room, spending the whole night in there. She had this creepy, high-pitched giggle, and I could hear it through the walls all night. I wondered what she could possibly be doing. Occasionally, she would come out and talk for like 2 minutes, always slurring her words, so I suspected that she was drinking a lot. Other times, she wouldn't say anything and would just be standing in the hallway, watching me in the living room, until I would turn and see her. Surprised, I'd say, "Hello, Beth," and then there would be this long, awkward pause where she would eventually break the silence with her creepy, high-pitched giggle. It was uncomfortable being around her. She gave me the chills. One night, I woke up at around 2 a.m. because I heard what sounded like the front door being unlocked. I came out of my bedroom, and all the lights were off, but I could still see Beth standing at the front door. She had her face against it and was turning the lock back and forth repeatedly, mumbling my name every time she turned the lock. That really freaked me out. And it also doesn't help that she kind of looks like a bigger version of the girl from the movie The Ring. I just quietly went back to my room and tried to sleep. Another night, I was watching the movie Gladiator, and she stumbled out of her room, turning on the living room lights and forcing me to pause the movie, which annoyed me. Then she asked me if I wanted to hear about her ex-boyfriend. It was an uncomfortable transition into the topic, but I just said, sure, and awkwardly sat back to listen to her. 10 minutes into the story, she was so riled up, screaming at the top of her lungs about their breakup. Worried that the neighbors were going to call the cops, I was repeatedly asking her to lower her voice. She was so worked up and screamed, "I'll slit his throat." That was a big game changer. Suddenly, I realized that I had no idea what this girl was capable of. She was practically a stranger, and everything I had seen was becoming alarmingly more disturbing. After a few more minutes, she thanked me for listening and started giggling. I got out of there fast and went to my room to go to sleep. I had an unsettling feeling about being in the house with her, and what's worse is that there was no lock on my bedroom door. I pushed the edge of my dresser in front of it to act as a barricade. I woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of my dresser scraping against the floor. Beth was pushing the door open. I turned on my light, shouting at her to stop. I could see her through the opening of the door. She was so drunk and had this insane look in her eyes. I pushed the door closed and yelled at her to go to bed. I could hear her walk back to her room, but I couldn't fall back asleep. In the morning, when I went out into the hallway, my heart dropped. I saw one of her steak knives on the floor by my door. All I could think about was her saying she would slit that guy's throat. I confronted her about it, and she said she didn't remember trying to push my door open or even telling me about her ex. I had enough. My lease was month to month, so I found a new spot and moved out. About a month after I moved out, she contacted me. I was at the movies and my phone was off. When I got out, I turned my phone on, and to my shock, I had received over 40 text messages in the past 2 hours. They were texts that ranged from everything between, "How are you?" to, "I freaking hate you." It was insane. I didn't respond, and I never heard from her again. I always wonder, if I hadn't set my dresser in front of my door, would she have gone into my room and slit my throat? It terrifies me. Alright, I got a prime story that made me learn a lot about using Craigslist. First off, I grew up in a small rural town and then moved to Southern California for college. This was just after the new iPhone had come out, and I desperately wanted one. So I found an ad on Craigslist for a guy selling his for about $50 cheaper than everyone else's ads. I gave the guy a call, and he told me that his company had switched to using BlackBerries, so he had no need for the iPhone. I agreed to go meet up with him since he seemed to have a fairly straight story, or at least it sounded that way. I wasn't familiar with the Los Angeles area, but I managed to drive up to the front of this big, low-income apartment complex, where he said I should meet him. Mind you, this was in the middle of the day, right next to a busy street. The neighborhood wasn't the best, but I'm a big dude, roughly 6'7", and 230 pounds. I figured I would be all right. I finally see the supposed businessman who turned out to be a little dude dressed in baggy jeans and a big white t-shirt, along with another dude dressed the same. While I was sitting in my truck waiting for this guy to show up, I saw a guy sitting over in a blue Ford Focus just staring at me and grinning the entire time, which made me feel uneasy about the situation. Once I saw the said businessman, I knew something wasn't right and decided to get out of there as fast as possible. I started to walk back to my truck, telling him I needed to grab my cash for the iPhone. But when I got into my truck and tried to put my keys into the ignition, the other little dude of about 5'6" jumped into my passenger side, stuck a gun in my waist, and said, "No, homie, you ain't leaving. Gonna need everything you got." It might have been stupid on my part, but seeing how this dude was holding the gun all clumsily, and it looked more like a metal airsoft gun as opposed to a real gun, I decided to reach across, open the door, and shove him out. I did it so quickly that he didn't have time to react, and by the time he realized he was already outside my passenger door, he started banging on the glass to let him back in. I figured I was good to go now and could get the hell out of there, but things only switched up faster. When the second guy got thrown out, I was so focused on him that I didn't realize the first guy had gone to go get about 5 or 6 of his much bigger buddies, which were now all at my driver's side window that was over halfway down. As I turned my head towards them, they all started reaching into my window, throwing punches, trying to grab me and pull me out for what seemed like forever. I kept trying to dodge punches while trying to get my keys into the ignition so I could get my truck going. After a few good hits to my head, I was dazed and decided as a last-ditch effort to throw the cash I had for the iPhone all over the ground outside behind them. They immediately stopped attacking me and ran toward picking up all the bills, allowing me to get out of there. I went down a few blocks and realizing I couldn't see straight, I called the LA County Sheriff. When they came, they thought I was part of some drug deal gone bad, but it turned out that these tweakers had done the same thing to 8 other victims and had stolen their licenses, saying if they went to the police, they would kill their families. I was able to pick them out of those 6-pack lineups, and all of them, except the little dude with the gun, were sent to prison. Fortunately, they also had to pay me back through the wages they made at prison. When my husband and I first moved in together, We decided to get a few cheap furniture items from Craigslist. I browsed around and saw a pair of bedside tables that a woman was advertising that were gorgeous and in great condition. I messaged her, and she told me if I picked them up, I could have them for free. I was shocked she would just give them away. She originally advertised them for $50, but was now saying she just wanted them gone. She was a bit far away, but we thought it would be fun to take a little road trip and stop to look at the countryside on our way there. After a scenic 4-hour drive, we arrived at the woman's house and were both immediately overcome with a creepy feeling we couldn't explain. We joked about her being a serial killer before we got out of the car. Her house was falling apart. Her lawn was so overgrown you could barely see where the front yard was, and all around there were statues of human-animal hybrid creatures, like gargoyles almost. We walked up her garden path, which was a small clearing within the tall grass, and knocked on her door. While we were waiting, I noticed she had wind chimes on her deck, made of steak knives. I nudged my husband and pointed them out, but he just shrugged. Maybe she's into crafts or something, we thought. I've seen similar wind chimes done with spoons, so it wasn't that weird, but definitely not something you see every day. She wasn't answering the door, so we knocked on the door again, but there was still no answer. My husband squinted and looked through the tiny glass pane on the door. He made a strange face and said, "Let's go." My heart leaped into my throat, and we quickly made our way back through her creepy front yard and into our car to drive away. I was so confused. I really wanted those tables, but I was also scared of what he had seen. I asked him what was wrong. He said that when he looked into the glass pane, he saw the woman staring back at him with a crazy smile. He said she was honestly the most frightening-looking person he had ever seen. I asked him why she was so scary-looking, and he said her eyes and mouth were so big they didn't look real. I'm scared to think of what she would have done to us if we hadn't left.